you still have, and you have until Ayin Gimel, if I'm not mistaken, that's what Moshe said. So even though it's Yesod is Chanukah, nevertheless, it's all that we've been talking about and all that we're learning. The attack of Yavan and Western culture, the attack against what's called Chelik Belokei Yisrael. That's what we've been talking about. What that means, Chelik Belokei Yisrael. The strange Xavier that they made, carve on the horns of the ox. The ox is Yosef HaTzadik. That's Bechor Shor Hadalo. Shor, Kana Shor is Yosef HaTzadik. And whether consciously or unconsciously, that other world knows that if a Jew is detached from any feeling of Kedushas, Atayr, Kedushas Yisrael, from Kirvis Elokim, the person is detached from that. If he is submerged in that world which is the opposite of Yosef HaTzadik, if he's stuck in the house of Potiphar, so then you don't have to worry about making Xeris against Shabbos or against learning Torah. You don't have to do the rest of this stuff, because once you hit the main artery of a Jew, that main artery of a Jew is Kedusha. It's Chelik V'Lokei Yisrael. Chelik V'Lokei Yisrael. Once that's torn, once that person is not in that place of Yosef HaTzadik, so Mimela Shabbos is just some extra sleep, better food. And Torah, if you like Torah, it's something which is fascinating, it's interesting, but it doesn't make you into a tzaddik, into a better person. The mitzvahs, okay, the mitzvah sit in the sukkah. It doesn't stay at the other side if you sit in a hut for a couple of hours a day, for a week. It doesn't bother the other side. What bothers the other side is Kirvus Elokim, is Dveikus B'Hashem, is that a Jew is living a life of Kedusha and Dveikus B'Hashem. And what happens when a person gives in to the wife of Potiphar and lives that life, whether virtually or chas v'chalila, in reality, in real time, they say, then the person loses that sense of a chelik b'lokei Yisrael. So you can go through the motions of being an Orthodox Jew. Oftentimes they lose it altogether. Kids will oftentimes just run away from it completely because they're very, very honest and they can't stand hypocrisy, and also they have their the hormones are all over the place. So if they're not feeling a chelik b'lokei Yisrael, so what do I need to do this for? Whereas the adults are, if you're already stuck, you got a wife, you got 4 kids, you have a shul, this whole thing. What am I going to do? I'm going to become not religious all of a sudden? It's ridiculous. So, you can continue going on. But the kids, they don't have this, they don't feel tied down. They feel their parents, their grandparents are alive. When I was growing up, was the Holocaust, hovering all the time over us. And it's not possible for you not to keep Shabbos, not to kosher, not to put on film. After all of your grandparents were killed because they were Jews, so that made it very unrealistic for us to rebel at that time. And but the bottom line is that if you lose that feeling of chelik b'lokei Yisrael, because you're sinking in the house of Potiphar, so it's a matter of time till that person is disengaged from Yiddishkeit, either lemaisa, disengaged and not keeping things, or just going through the motions, which again, is still something. It's a chashuv thing too, but it's not what was meant when Hashem spoke to us at Har Sinai and said, "Anochi Hashem Elokecha," and panim al panim dibarti imachem, I spoke to you face to face. That's how Hashem wants that relationship to continue. So on the bottom of page Ayin, the Kasha Yesh, 5 lines up from the bottom of the right column. Kasha Yesh Lam Or, as I Mosa Kohavet Tov Le'nai, V'Yev Shal Anatkem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When the Yiddishkeit of a person is lichtig, because he's feeling that he is strong, he's overcoming the temptation of Eshes Potiphar, and he's living a life of Kedushas bris. Kedushas bris doesn't just mean the actual Aveira that we've been learning about, and we studied in the Shulchan Aruch about the actual Aveira of Chalila, of being poigem the bris. The bris means that there's a deep connection, a deep relationship. And be poigem bris, the same thing in a marriage. It doesn't mean that a person, Chalila, went to some other woman. That's the Maisa of Gamma Bris, in the worst form of Gamma Bris. That's the end of a trail. But the beginning of the trail is to feel disconnected. A husband and wife, to feel that there's no connection between each other. And when the husband's mind is already wandering to other places, that's a Pagama Bris. Even though he hasn't done anything. He hasn't spoken to another woman. He doesn't look at any other woman. But Lamaisa, already that's a Madrega of Pagama Bris, because there's the actual Aveir itself, Chalila, and then there's the beginning of that, the shorish of that, which is the lack of connection. A lack of connection. So when a person doesn't feel that Mosaka or V'Tov, when a person is in a place of Kedusha, Tahara, and Kedusha Sabris, so then the world of Greece doesn't hold sway over him. He's not interested in it. He's not bothered by it. It doesn't excite him. Because why? Because he's excited by Yiddishkeit. He's excited by Torah mitzvahs. Because Mosaka or V'Tov L'nai. V'yefshel not k'mekadosh baruch hu shum kach yodu ha'yivanim. Therefore, the Yivanim knew shekol oid Yehudim dvukim b'midas ha'kedusha, that as long as Jews are connected to that world of Yosef HaTzadik and the holding on to the Atzmas Yosef, Yuchlu Lamu B'chol Nisyanis, then they'll be able to, they'll go and hide in caves, but they'll keep on keeping Shabbos. They'll go in some kind of a bunker with a Gemara. They know that as long as a Jew feels the Mesikus of Yiddishkeit, and a Jew feels that way about himself as being somebody who is in a place of Kirvus Elokim, and he hasn't been paigim the bris with Hashem, that he has that bris with Hashem, so the Yivanim knew that the Jews will A, they'll survive, and B, they're going to find ways to continue on in their Yiddishkeit. So the Yivanim were very smart, and they understood that the thing is to get to the main artery. All the other stuff, Shabbos and mitzvahs and all that, that's all the Ramach and the Shasa, all those Gidim and Evarim of Yiddishkeit, all of that are the highways and the roads and the avenues of Yiddishkeit. So the Yivanim was smart. In general, our enemies were trying to shut down the Shabbos and close the mikveh and all these things. But they understood that we have to get to the main artery. And if you get to the main artery, which is Kedushas Yisrael, which is Kirvus Elokim, which is I have a chelik b'Elokei Yisrael, so then everything else will lose. They'll lose their excitement. They'll lose their interest. So they're not going to be interested in Shabbos. They're not going to be interested in other things. So how do we get to that? How do we get to that place of the main artery? So the main artery is Atzmas Yosef. That's the main artery of a Jew. It's Kedushas Yisrael. That's the chelik of Elokei Yisrael. So the Yevanim understood very, very, very smart, and they understood that Kol Oid Yehudim Dvukim b'midas hakedusha Yuchlu Lamu B'chol Nisyanis. When a Jew is connected to midas hakedusha, they'll somehow pass all the tests. They'll get through it. They might stumble here and there, but they'll get to the end. They'll work it out. When you're in that world of Kedushas Yisrael, Yosef HaTzadik, like I mentioned yesterday about the Kiddush, we're talking about a little bit that the same Yosef that was a Roitzam, the innocent, pure boy that was a shepherd by his father, was the Yosef that was in Mitzrayim, that was a king in Mitzrayim. Amad B'tzidka. He stayed Yosef HaTzadik. That's what it means, Yosef HaTzadik Mitzrayim. So the Yivanim understood that it's not going to change a Jew just by plopping him into another place. You could put him into downtown Athens or Rome or Mitzrayim, but he'll still be a Jew. He'll just find a way to hide with his Gemara and to put on film where they can't catch him. He'll find a way, which we always have. But if we can get to that main artery, to that place of Yosef HaTzadik, and then on top of that, then on top of that, you put him into a certain kind of a neighborhood, and he's got Broadway, and he's got all the other streets surrounding him. So then he doesn't feel the mesikus of Yiddishkeit. He's not excited about Yiddishkeit because he's been poiging the bris. He's damaged that bris with Hashem. So he's open for business. And the Yevon understood it. Now they're open for business. But they knew they're not going to be successful. They understood that you cannot beat the Jews by just hitting these gidim and these evarim. You can't destroy them like that. You have to get to the heart of Yiddishkeit, and the heart of Yiddishkeit is the bris with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the bris of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Yosef. Yosef HaTzadik. V'zu HaKavana. Now look how he explains this now. V'zu HaKavana on the left column on page Ayin. V'zu HaKavana b'mesha amro kisva keren hashor she'en lechem chelek be'elokei Yisrael. So this is the deeper meaning of that strange gzeira to engrave on the keren of the shore that ein lechem chelek be'elokei Yisrael. I have no chelek be'elokei Yisrael. Not that physical act of making Jews do that is a symbol of something much deeper that was going on. Nobody's asking me or you to write on the Keren HaShor that we have no Chelek B'Elokei Yisrael. No one's asking us that. But the truth is that your phones our phones are calling out to us all the time. And there's a gzeira. This gzeira of Tavshin Pei that we're living in this time where all of us, I remember all the years we didn't have any of these things, but the last 20 years, whatever it's 25 years, the kids are now growing up, and they have the Keren HaShor in their hands from the time that they're like. People tell me that the kids in third grade, they have their own phone. What are they calling it, stockbroker or something? I'm not sure. They have their own phone. It means that's a gzeira of kisvlechem al Keren HaShor shenechem chelek Yisrael. So it's interesting. There are certain tzaddikim in the dar that don't stop screaming about this, about the technology, and people who are outside of that orbit see it as being like a very strange thing. So Rabbi Shamayim, Rabbi Tzvi and other tzaddikim that they don't stop on this Indian of the technology, and people from the outside say, "Well, come on, deal with it, let's move on with this." But you have to understand these tzaddikim who are so committed to the world of Yosef HaTzadik, they see this as the Keren HaShor. Nothing less. They see that as the Keren HaShor. And when they hear about, I'll get a better filters and that, they say, you're already losing. So the extreme things that come out from that world, which to Western sensibilities of Jews, Orthodox Jews, whose minds and hearts have already been affected by and sometimes infected by this culture, they see these things as being very extreme. Like, what do you think? This is Meir Sharm or something? When I have to do business, I do that. When my kids have to take their tests, and you have to take it. We have all these explanations, but I'm just trying to explain why is it that you see these tzaddikim when you read these proclamations and these things, and you're saying this is so unrealistic. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to work. And everybody's doing this, and don't you get it? You can't argue with them about it. The reason you can't argue with them and you can't reason with them is because they know the truth. And of course they're absolutely right. And of course it would be ideal if we could reset and we wouldn't have any of this stuff. It would mess up business and all the other things. But of course they're right. And it doesn't change the fact that the thing that you hate when your kid's doing something you don't like, and what does the kid say? Well, my friends do it. Don't you hate that? Don't we all do that also? Why is it that everybody's stuck with their technology? Everybody else does it. It's the same thing the kids say. Everybody else is doing it. So the kids say same thing your kid tells you why they want a phone. All my friends have a phone, a smartphone. I also want it. And so when you get older, you say the same thing. You make like business, all these fancy things. But the truth is, all my friends have it. So those tzaddikim that are screaming and yelling about it, the real tzaddikim, I'm not talking about stam people or troublemakers, the real tzaddikim, when they're screaming and yelling about it, they're screaming from that place of Ein Lanu Chelik B'Elokei Yisrael. They feel that this is Gzeira, and they use these lashonos. That's Gzeira. And then when the sophisticated Americans or British, whatever, hear this word, there's a Gzeira. It's a Gzeira. It's not a Gzeira, but there's no Romans standing over us. There's no Greeks standing over us. They don't mean that we're being forced. Otherwise, they see this is much worse. They see this as much worse. That it's just become a way of life. And it's the Karen Hashar. It's the Gzeir of Karen Hashar. V'zekavon of B'nei Shomro Kitzvah Karen Hashar she'en lechem chelek b'Klal Yisrael ki reishis kol bikshu lishboris Karen Hashar shamidas Yosef. The Yevonim got it. They first got to work at breaking this inyan of Yosef HaTzadik. We're going to go after Yosef HaTzadik. We're not going to kill them. We're not going to close down the yeshivas. We're not even going to close down the mikvahs. We're going to go after Yosef HaTzadik. That was the strategy. Whether they knew it consciously or subconsciously, in Shemayim, their Sar, whatever it is, that's not important. They were good at it. And they're still working at that. We're going to go after the midah of Yosef HaTzadik. The Tameh is Yisrael, V'litol Mehem es Kedusha also. Take away the Kedusha from a Jew. Take away from him that feeling of Kedusha. That sense of Kedusha bris. V'ad kidei she'en lechem chelik b'Elokei Yisrael. Ki al yidei she'poigme b'midas HaKedusha. Once you've been able to cause that person, or to bring him into that place of Chalila, being poigim in this midah of Kedusha that we've been learning about all these years, Karen Hashar, that's called Karen Hashar. The Shar is Yosef HaTzadik. Ma'avidim es ha'chelik b'Elokei Yisrael. And the chelik Elokei Yisrael starts to evaporate. It could take a month, it could take a year, it could take 5 years, but it begins to evaporate. It begins to evaporate. One of the Chaver sent me a clip from a Chassidish podcast. Did you know that such a thing exists? There are 3 guys. One of them looked like with the regular levush and the original levush. The other 2 had it already tied up very tight. They were wearing weren't wearing the Shabbos levush, and they have microphones hanging down, and they're sitting like in a place that's set up like a living room, and it's all in Yiddish. And he sent me this clip about what the fellow was saying, which is something very good. So I said to my wife, you're not going to believe this. You have to see this. She said, what is it? So I showed her this clip, and first he said something, but she wanted first a translation. So I said, no, he's saying good stuff. They're interviewing this guy, and he's saying good things. So I said, well, you don't see anything wrong with this? She said, I know what you're upset about. Right? I said, yeah, what's going on? I said, we had, at least there was this one holdout. When I was growing up, we had all of the crazy stuff that was in the 1960s and 70s. But I knew that I would go to Williamsburg, and I would get out of that. You know what I'm saying? There were certain strongholds that were still that they didn't reach yet. That Amazon didn't get to. There's no Amazon then. I mean, that it didn't get to. Yavon didn't get to that spot. There was still and I enjoyed that. That had a lot to do with my whole upbringing and decisions that I made to change because my father would take me to that world and in that world I felt that this is real, this is authentic. They didn't fall into the whole business. And the second I would get back to my element, I was thrilled with the baseball, with all the other stuff. That was and everything, the television. But I knew that you go on the BQ, and you take a little bit of a ride. All right, Borough Park fell much earlier. Borough Park fell earlier. But Williamsburg, and especially because my family was there, and I saw how they were and how they lived, and I would spend time with my cousins. I remember there was that we were there once on a Sunday. We went to visit my relatives there, and they might not even remember this, but I remember this, that I wanted to play stickball. I wanted to teach them how to play stickball. There was a playground, there was a wall, for stickball. Young guys don't even know what that is. So there was a wall. All you need is a wall and even a broomstick, right? And you make a strike. You make the zone, the box, and it was the most fun. I had the ball. So I brought with me from Queens. I brought with me like a stick ball bat and a ball, and I brought it to the apartment, my cousin's apartment on Division Street. My father said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to play with the guys some stickball." I said, "You're not playing any stickball with the guys. Like, leave them alone. Just leave them alone." And my father didn't mind that I played stickball back at home. We were always playing. My father said, he didn't say anything more than that. He just said, put it away. But it's not for here. That's not the place for it. It's not for here. No, but what I understood later what he was saying is that don't mess with this. There's still something pure from the Haim, Still something we have left from that world that they destroyed. Don't mess with it. That's what I felt when I saw the guy sitting around the microphone like on a couch, with a podcast and talking like they're schmoozing in Mamaloshin. So this is wrong. And I know it's good because they're talking and they're trying to work things out, and I like that. So on another, what my wife was saying is, would you rather they not discuss things? So no, it's good. But that means that it must be like a lot of the chevra there have iPhones, because otherwise, why they watch? Who's watching this? I don't know if you can get the clips on a regular. You can't get only on a knife, right? A smartphone. You can't get a clip on a regular phone. So that means that who their customers? The customers are not in Teaneck. You understand? Nothing against Teaneck. That's not. But that's not. Their customers are in Borough Park and Williamsburg, and Muncie and Monroe. Those are the customers. So I want to say, guys, come on. You're holding on for a long time. You're giving into Yavan. You're giving into Yavan. That's already. I know because they want to save the chevra and they're doing good things. I'm not critical of it. They want to help and they're having some honest conversations, which is good. But the whole look was just like the way it just looked wrong to me. I guess it broke something from when I was a kid and I tried to see things in an idealized way. And it's not so idealized as it used to be. And it's hard to hold on to this. And that's the strategy of Yavan. And it's not, they don't mean necessarily evil or harm, but that's how you get to the Jew. With Yosef HaTzadik. It's subtle, but that's how you get to Yosef HaTzadik. L'tam Yisrael v'litam hem es kedushasa. Right? K'dei she'en lechem chelek b'nei Yisrael, ki ha'idei she'pagim b'midas ha'kedusha, ki ha'nashar, ma'abdim z'chelek b'nei Yisrael. What are the words that are said at the bris of a baby? The bris. What are the words that are said at the bris? Kel chai chelkeinu. Most beautiful words. Kel chai, the living God, chelkeinu. We engrave into the flesh, not into the Keren Ashar. That's what the Yavanim wanted, to scribble onto the Keren Ashar. That's what they wanted to engrave against the bris. To engrave onto the Keren Ashar. What happens by a bris? By the bris, the baby is engraved with the bris of Yosef HaTzadik, the bris of Avraham Avinu, and we say, Kel chai chelkeinu tzureinu, hatzel yedidus shareinu misha. Save this child that he shouldn't chliya. Save my flesh and blood that he shouldn't get caught up in the world of Yavan. That's what we're saying. Mishachas, that he shouldn't be destroyed, that the bris shouldn't be destroyed, that he should be engraved with Kel chai chelkeinu. That's who we are. Kel chai chelkeinu. The living God is our chelik. That's our chelik. Kel chai chelkeinu. Not the Broadway, not the basement, not the tele. Kel chai chelkeinu. Mi sheyesh lo chelik b'elokei Yisrael. Hari Hashem Baruch Hu lo kel chai. When you're feeling this chelik b'elokei Yisrael, and you're working on this kedusha of Yosef HaTzadik, then your Yiddishkeit is alive. Because by you, Hashem is not something from a book. By you, Hashem is a Kel Chai. Is a Lebedek God. He's a living God. He's an Elokim Chai. He's not somebody that they write about in the book that they thought that they saw, and he told me, or they heard from him, and he told me thousands of years ago that I can't do this, I got to do that. But he's Kel Chai. He's alive. Messiah's libo v'or einav, and he's the joy of a person's heart and the light of a person's eyes. The The Svardim say that for you, l'cha kel shukasi. L'cha kel shukasi. They have some beautiful lagunim too, the Svardim. L'cha kel shukasi. My tshuka, my longing in life is for you. Hachiata manas chelki, sasam libi v'or einai. Those are the words. The joy of my heart. V'or einai. And the light of my eyes. That's when you live a life of Kedusha. Kel chai, kel kenu. Sasam libi v'or einai. B'darga zu shel kel chai, kel kenu. This madrega of kel chai, kel kenu. Kliya b'midas HaKedusha. You're not going to have that feeling of Kel Chai Chel Keinu because you go twice a month to a kumsitz. Yeah, you might get a nice feeling by being at the kumsitz. That's great, but to live a life Kel Chai Chel Keinu when you're at work, when you're in school, in your private life at home, to live a life of Kel Chai Chel Keinu, your davening is Kel Chai Chel Keinu. That's clearly that depends on Midas HaKedusha. That depends on Yosef HaTzadik, on Midas HaKedusha. K'mayim HaKosav, it says in the Yiv, bris karati le'enai u'ma esboinin al besula. I have made a bris with my eyes. So here we have bris mila by the 8th day. We've spoken a little bit about the bris haloshen, the mouth, and the bris ha'enai. It says in Pasuk. Bris karati le'enai. I have made a bris with my eyes. My esboinin al besula. Not to look at girls. I have made a bris karati le'enai. But it's more than that. Uma esboinin al besula. Uma chelke. The pasuk is uma chelke lo kamimal. The way that he brings the Ibn Ezra. The way to understand the pasuk is, I'm going to look at something like this at the wife of Potiphar. Basula means that world. I'm going to look at that stuff. I have a bris. I made a bris. My eyes. My eyes are part of my bris. I have a bris with Hashem with my eyes. What to look at. So I'm going to look at that. So look what Ibn Ezra says. Mefarish Ibn Ezra over there in the Yiv. Mefarish Ibn Ezra. Those who are indulging in looking at the psulas, those who are indulging in that stuff, they lose their connection. They no longer feel a chelik. They lose that feeling of a chelik. Kel chai chel kein. They lose that feeling of kel chai chel kein. So they can go on davening, they can go on Shabbos, they can go on mitzvahs, but without kel chai chel kein. Those who are not faithful to the bris of the eyes, and they're looking at things that they shouldn't be looking at, they're destroying. That's the pagama bris of the eyes. They're destroying, and they say, I didn't do anything, I just looked at something, I didn't do anything. But that bris with the eyes, when it's broken, the mafsidim is dargas chelki. They lose that feeling of chelki, of chelak elokamimal, of kel chai chelkeinu. As a chelak elokamimal, v'zemevi choshech benafshem, and that brings, as everybody knows who's been through that, it brings a darkness into the soul, a darkness. Everything is dark. It brings a darkness into the soul. Nishmas Yehudi chelak elokamimal. Now it doesn't happen by somebody who's not Jewish. He doesn't feel a choshech benafsho. Maybe sometimes a very fine person could be that there's a feeling of choshech. But when it comes to lahavdil to a yid, who is kel chai chel keinu, it's a pagam habris with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, because Hashem has entered into a unique bris with each and every Jew, with the children of Avraham Avinu. So he entered into a bris with each and every one of us. Every one of us had the bris by the 8th day, and therefore we're very sensitive to pagam habris, and when a person says Nishmas Yudi Chelik L'Kamimal, the neshama of a Jew is a Chelik L'Kamimal. V'hi makor ha'emunah ha'meir b'nafsha. It's the makor of the emunah that's shining inside of you. You could believe, a person believes that God exists, he believes in Hashem, but he doesn't feel kel chai chel kein. That's what happens. You believe in Hashem, but the feeling of kel chai chel kein, that's something else. That you can't fix with a nice niggin. That's not going to kumzitz. That you don't fix like that. K'mayim Chazal, haneshama hi mevila la'adam lahakir es kainai. The neshama is what makes it possible for us to have a connection to Hashem. And from there, from my neshama is the source of the joy of my heart and the light of my eyes. But a person who's looking at things he shouldn't look at, and he's pagim in the bris of the eyes, he's pagim in the bris of Yosef HaTzadik, then and he becomes detached from the neshama. Mimela, he doesn't feel anymore that sasan libi v'or einai, the joy of my heart and the light of my eyes. He doesn't feel that, and he can continue to go through the motions of Yiddishkeit. And every now and then he could have his service. Of course, it comes a yontiv, Shalim Kippur, he feels his service. But they become further and further apart. As I said, the kids, especially the boys, you don't see this by the girls as much. By the girls, much, much less. They have also, but there are other inyanim. But by the boys, you can see what happens. That when they don't feel that chelik b'lekei Yisrael, then they don't want to do things. Because they have a very simple question. Why should I do this if I don't feel anything? At some point, when you're older, and you've been doing it for many years, you stop talking like that. But when you're a kid, you don't feel it. Why should I do it? They say the same thing about homework. They're very honest. I don't care about this. I don't want to do it. No, it's good for you. You're going to need to do it, or else you're not going to get in college. If you don't get to school, you're not going to get married. Who's going to marry you? You're an idiot. So no one's going to marry you. And if you don't get married, and the kids listening to the whole Chadgadia, I'll copy someone else's homework. At best. There's one. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in this. You never had such a revelation, never dawned upon you, like when you were in your calculus class, like, what do I need this for? This is not relevant. Remember, as long as we had numbers in math, I figured that, it helps you to understand, Melstad Amari's ERA, you know what I mean? You understand that Lashon? It helps you understand Mantle's batting average, There's some usefulness to numbers, I get that. Or if you want to buy something, you have to make a cheshbon, right? I get that. We didn't have calculators, remember? Ernie, you remember that, right? So no calculators, you have to make a cheshbon. We used to have to think. So you have to make a cheshbon. But then we got to, I think it was the 9th grade when they started algebra, and then A plus B and C, and so I was thinking, so what I have to make believe that A is 1 and make believe that B is 2. So what I have to make believe? A could be 1 and B could be 2. And 1 plus 2 equals 3. No, now we have a new mahalach. A really means 1, and B really means 2. And how much is A plus B? And I remember we were talking like, what was wrong with 1 plus 2? That's not A and B. A and B equals C. Why? So as kids, the feeling was, this is totally useless. I'm going to meet people that understand that there's numbers and there's letters. What do I have to start mixing that? And from a very early age, kids who are very practical and who are very honest, they really don't want to go on with things that don't make any sense to them and are very impractical. What use do I have of this? I have no benefit from any of this. So then everybody's wondering, like, this kid's off the derech, how do you go off the derech? How do you reach the thing? Again, best yeshiva, best family. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. Many of their parents would like to do the same thing, but they can't. But it's just not how it works. But the bottom line is, the kid does not feel kel chai chel kenu. This is not relevant. He's not living. So Moshe Rabbeinu is talking to Paro about God, right? And Paro starts pulling out from his shelf all the books with the different gods. He's got a catalog of gods. Because back in those days, you could actually order on Amazon. You could order your favorite god, right? You had the next day. So Paro's pulling out his book and looking for it. Where is this? Mi Hashem she'eshmuk, she'eshmuk. Who's it? It's not in the book. I don't have it in my catalog. It's not. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, you don't understand. I'm talking about Kel Chai Chelkeinu. I'm not talking about some imagination. I'm not talking about a book. I'm not talking about a fairy tale. I'm talking about the God that's going to flatten out the whole Mitzrayim in a few minutes. That's what I'm talking about. And if a child doesn't feel that he's alive, then something in a book. It's in a catalog. But the God that the kid is worshiping, especially if it's a young lady that he's met, she's alive and well. Well, she's alive. And the friends who are texting and WhatsApping, they're all alive. What about the Bar Shalom? No. Never saw him, never met him. I don't feel that he's alive. I don't feel anything alive over here. And that's really when they're little. When they're little. Once they start to get already older and Chalila, they start to fall apart with the union of Pagam bris, then that chips away at any feeling of chiyas, at all, of kel chai chelkein. It's just gone. When that candle of Hashem, the neshama, is not shining in a person, there's a darkness. So what does he do? Nobody wants to have darkness. So they look for other kinds of light. This is Yiddishkeit is not my source of energy. It's not my source of light. So they start looking in other places for light. Something else. Because nobody wants to live in darkness. So they're going to find it somewhere else. Vor einai, gam heim einiti. I don't have this light at all. So when a person is living in Choshet, they can't stand it. So they want to find something else. Now, a Jew can keep all of Yiddishkeit, as we were talking. A person can keep all of Torah mitzvahs, and he could even be giving a shir. Even without that or. Even without that or. He could still be keeping all of Yiddishkeit. But the krius, the coldness, it's the North Pole inside. North Pole, the krius. And he's not able to ever feel the excitement and to ignite this Eish Kodesh, this fire. And the place in mitzvahs that's most affected is not learning. It's just davening that's most affected, because davening, if you don't feel kel chai chelkeinu, it really feels crazy. With learning, it's interesting in that. But when it comes to davening, if you don't feel kel chai, that's why with the davening is the hardest thing, as you see with the kids and with the adults. The davening is the hardest thing, because if you don't feel kel chai, if you don't feel that, so davening is very, 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 very hard. Yeshaya. V'yom Hashem, Yan ki nigash ha'mazeh, it's a very famous pasuk. V'fiv v'svasav kibduni, that the Navi says that this nation, Hashem saying, no, I'm upset, because they honor me with their mouths, with their lips. Because they say all the ashreis and all the yishtabach. With their lips, they say all the right words. But v'libo rochak mimeni. But v'libo, the heart, rochak mimeni. The hearts are very far from me. But tihi ras v'oisi mitzvahs anashim l'mada. And what they call Yiras Shamayim is that they're just keeping mitzvahs anashim l'mada. They keep the mitzvahs by rote. It's just become a way of life. It's a cultural thing. It's a way of life. It's a way of life. Hanavi eno mochiach es Yisrael achisaron v'kimah mitzvahs. So look, the Navi Yeshaya is not saying that Hashem is saying, I'm upset with you because you don't bench lulav on Sukkot. Doesn't say that. Hashem says we bench lulav on Sukkot. And we don't find the Navi saying Hashem is upset with you because you didn't make Kiddush on Shabbos. You make Kiddush on Shabbos. What the Navi is saying is Hashem is telling us that with your mouths and with your emotions you honor me. But libam rachak mimeni. But liba rachak, but your heart is very, very far. That's not a bris. That's not a bris the same way in a marriage. His wife says, liba rachak mimeni. Yeah, you do all the right things you're supposed to do. You help with this, you do that. But liba rachak mimeni. But the heart is rachak mimeni. It's very far. And therefore, the Navi is saying, Hanavi, page Ayin Aleph, Hanavi and Mochiach Yisrael HaChisaron B'Kiyum HaMitzvahs. That's why the Greeks were not, that was not their thing initially to stop the mitzvahs. Get the heart. Get to the heart of Yiddishkeit. And the heart of Yiddishkeit is the bris. And the bris depends on Yosef HaTzadik. And when that bris is broken, we got them. It's just a matter of time. It's not gonna last. It can't last. It can only go so far. Because it's possible for a person to become Torah mitzvahs. And not only that, a person's become the mitzvahs. He has the most beautiful lulav, not just a lulav. He gets the nicest lulav. And he has tefillin, beautiful tefillin. And he's medaktik, he keeps everything properly. But his entire avoda is habit. Just regilus. Again, it's a culture, it's a way of life, it keeps the Jews together, and all these other. There was a great, very, very famous Hebrew and Yiddish writer that you heard of. His name was Asher Ginsburg, but that's not what Jews called him. What do they call him? No, that's not his name. What was Shalom Aleicham's name? I can't remember the second. No, Achad Ha'am. Asher Ginsburg was Achad Ha'am. Achad Ha'am was a genius. He was an Ilu, learning. As a 13 or 14, he already had questions. Shas and Jew was writing back and forth with the Shalom Aleichem. Who he was. It was a tremendous Talmud Chacham. And he went off. It's a whole terrible story with him. He married the daughter of a Chassidish Rebbe. That's who he married. And he was upset with her that she stopped keeping mitzvahs. Even though he wasn't keeping anything, he stopped keeping everything. But he said he was upset, like, don't you have a mind of your own? Just because I'm a sheikh, it doesn't mean you should be a sheikh. It bothered him. He said, your father's a Rebbe, what's the matter with you? It bothered him that his wife wasn't keeping them. So he said, I worked this in out, and I don't want to do it anymore. But what are you doing? Just because I stopped keeping Shabbos, I'm not going to have cholent anymore? It's over? He was a brilliant person. So I used to read, when I was in school, I read a lot of this stuff. And when you would read his things, you felt like you were reading a sefer. That's why it was so dangerous. The tzaddikim were more afraid of his stuff than anybody else, much more than Shalom Aleichem stuff. They were afraid of his stuff. Because it sounded like a sefer, the way he read it. He wrote it like Svar, because that's who he was. And that's what he wrote. And his thing was that we have to keep, in the end, he had this idea that it's important for us to keep Shabbos, and to keep Yiddishkeit. Because he said that otherwise we're not going to remain Jews. And in other words, even if you don't believe in it, even if you're done with the whole thing of Maimon HaSinai, you're not into it, but the only way to preserve the Jewish people as a people, he said, there's only one way that has ever proven itself as a way of preserving the Jewish people as a people, and that's through Yiddishkeit. So it was a very strange thing that Achad Ha'am promoted Yiddishkeit, but not Emunah. He lost his faith. There's a machlokes whether at the end of his life, some say he started putting on film again. I don't know if it's true, but there's a whole talk about that. But he said that no, without Yiddishkeit there can't be. But he was wrong about that, because Yiddishkeit without Emunah, it could last for some time, for a relatively short time, but it doesn't have the ability to sustain itself. Ultimately, it can't continue on. It also can't continue. Without Kedusha, without Emunah, Yiddishkeit can't reproduce itself. it loses its gas, it loses its energy, it doesn't work. But he was trying to hold on to what was at that time, and he had this whole mahalach, and that was crisis and fear what he was writing. But it sounded like you were reading, like you were learning a piece of Torah, but it was all kfir, not because it's without Hashem. It's without Yosef HaTzadik. He even said you should daven, but everybody should go to shul. You go to minyan. It's like, but without anything, it doesn't work. And when that's these. Akol havod hi rak mitoch hergel u'regilus kemitzvus anoshim l'moda li'rega shalevu b'lichiyas. At his time, the main onslaught was intellectual. That was the maskilim. That was the intellect, and then that's why mostly was going after the brilliant young men in the yeshivas. And that was the main Inyan then. It wasn't so much. It wasn't Yosef HaTzadik wasn't the Inyan. That wasn't the biggest Inyan then. It was more emunah. The mind, thinking how to think, and so on and so forth. That's really what he was dealing with at that time. But at the end of time, it's all about Yom bris. Therefore, if it's only mitoch hergel u'regilus, mitzvahs anashim l'mada, bli rega shalev bli chiyas, then they understood that it's just that the gzeira, that from this gzeira of kisul chamal keren hashar, that everything else chalila would continue or would follow. And if not for the Chashmonai, the Kahanim, those Jews of unbelievable kedusha, who still had like the old Williamsburg in them, they still held on to that. Then they made that merit, and the merit began with the words Mila Hashem Elai. Whoever you still feels a trace of that chelik, join us, and they were able to get the guys together. If you still feel a little bit of that chelik, then you're on our team. You don't have to be a tzaddik. We'll take care with the tzaddik and we'll do all that stuff. You feel a little bit of a spark of that pure oil, let's go. And it was amazing. It was nice. They did it. And we can also do it. We should be zeicher to do it.